All right, hey guys, I'm Selcuk, CEO of a company called Bunch. So, hi. So there's going to be a lot more of these GIFs throughout the presentation, just fair warning. So quick background on my end is it's just so complicated that I actually had to have an infographic made and an intro about what I've done. So basically previously started and sold to advertising technology companies, joined the dark side of the force and was a venture capitalist at 500 startups for a little while. And then a couple of years ago started this company called Bunch. And we are a group video chat for live mobile games. So do you guys remember this episode from South Park? Right? A lot of us grew up playing games with our friends in the same physical space, right? So we would do these LAN parties, right? We would get together with our friends and play things like Counter-Strike or Age of Empires, or we would play like a Nintendo 64 with our friends in the same physical space. And a lot of the fun part of playing those games with our friends in the same physical space is the ability to yell at your friends while you're shooting at them, right? And what we do at Bunch is we allow kids to do the exact same thing with their friends on their phone anytime, anywhere. So you can just pick the game that you want to play, and it sends a beacon to your friends during the video chat room, and we use deep linking to drop the users into not only the exact same game, but the exact same game session. Without having to search for a username, and while Bunch is running on the background, they can actually talk to each other and even see the person that they're shooting at. So we've been around the App Store for about a year. As you can see, a lot of kids love the app, as you can see from all the emojis. But one of my favorite reviews came in the form of a bug report. When you shake the phone, you can send a bug report. One of the kids said, my teacher took my phone and threw it in the trash. And we're like, achievement unlocked. And we have this platform called Bunch Kit, where a lot of top mobile game studios actually integrate the best of our features into their own games. And some of those partners include some small studios like Supercell. And enough advertising. I want to talk about what we're coining the digital playground. So the reason why we do what we do is we think that the landscape of mobile game and gaming in general is colliding to the scale of a social network. And what I mean by that is just like people use Instagram to post photos and like photos of each other, a lot of games like Fortnite and PUBG are actual social networks, where you jump into an island and you shoot at your friends instead of posting photos of your friends. Because gaming used to be something like this, right? So you would go to a Best Buy or a GameStop, you would pick up the game, you would play it by yourself, you'd get bored, pick up a new game, and then play it again. But it's changing, right? So now we have games like Fortnite where the longevity of the game is much longer, because even though the game gets stale, your friends usually don't get stale, right? Roblox is a really good example of this. And what we're seeing, especially with unlimited data plans, really powerful smartphones, a lot of the younger gamer demographic prefer to play these games on their phone anytime, anywhere with their friends, just like a social network. And even though this is existing behavior, one of the really critical problems is I have a supercomputer in my pocket, you have a supercomputer in your pocket, why is it so hard to play together? Right? Some of the challenges is that, like, if I want to play a game of Space Team with you or Guns of Boom with you, you have to download the game. And you have to go to the App Store and search for the game and download it. And even if you download it, you have to search for my username, and maybe my username is weird. Right? And then you have to find where to search for my username, and people get bored and not end up doing it a lot of times, and every game does this differently. Right? So it's kind of a challenge. So we think one of the best ways of solving this problem is thinking beyond what happens in the boundaries and pixels of your own game. right? What do people do before they play your game? What do people do after they play your game? Where do they hang out, and how can they come to your game? One of the awesome ways of enabling this behavior is using deep linking. How many of you are familiar with deep linking is? Right? One of the cool things about using deep linking is I can share a link to play the game with you on any social network or any chat application I want. And then if you click this deep link, we play the game into the exact same game session, even if we're not friends in the game yet. And the cool thing about this is it works across any chat application. Right? My friends might be on a WhatsApp group. I might be able to airdrop the link to them. They might be on Messenger. They might be anywhere I want. And it drives an install for the game, even if my friends don't have the game yet. And when they open it, the game can contextually open it immediately into the game session. Right? I don't need to search the game on the App Store anymore. I don't need to search for the username. It just works. And the nice thing about this is it works across any chat application. And Bunch application is really designed for this deep linking experience, which makes it even smoother for the players. And then, so why should you add deep linking? Is it just to basically play together? A lot of game developers actually use deep linking to add friends. Right? It's one thing for me to basically say like, hey, download this game and copy and paste this weird username that I have by finding where to add me as a friend in the game. That's just a lot of work. I could just send you a deep link and attach my username as a parameter to the deep link, and when you basically open the link, we automatically become friends. Right? And increasing the connectivity of the social graph in the game is so important because that's how people come back to the game more often with their friends. Obviously, another way of doing that is joining parties, right? So I could share a link to my party so you can join my game party and we can play together, so it's so much easier. But also, this opens up interesting opportunities where, for example, a live streamer could say like, hey, here's a link to join the game that I'm streaming right now. Right? Imagine how tough this would be if I wasn't able to use a link. And you can even do esports, right? So you can be like, hey, Guns of Boom Season 2 is starting, and here's a link to join the esports league. Right? So the cool thing about this is our users live across many different applications outside of our game, and we don't need to get them to navigate our user interface to get them to the content or the experience they want. And there's some best practices that we work with our partners in implementing this behavior. One of the things is called deferred onboarding. Right? So for example, if I sent you a party link to join my game, and if you didn't have the game installed yet, it's awesome, I can drive an install for your game. But then a lot of games take first-time players into like a long tutorial or onboarding experience. So this is great for like users who are downloading your app from the App Store. But if there is a player that's waiting on the other side for you to complete that tutorial, that kind of sucks as a user experience, right? Like, I want to play with you, and then like the game goes like, hey, why don't you go to level 3 before you can play with your friend? So what we recommend our partners is, if you recognize that a friend is joining the party from a deep link, just skip the onboarding, because the best onboarding is the friends playing together. Another thing that we basically see is people confuse like in-game chat and chat applications, right? So PUBG has voice chat inside the game, but a lot of people still use things like Discord. And the reason for that is in-game chat, like the ability to voice chat with the people that you're playing, begins and ends with the game session, right? So you can't talk to your friends before you play the game, and you can't talk to your friends after you play the game. One of the interesting things about integrating your game with external chat applications is that your friends the people who play the game can gather and chat with their friends before they play the game, and they can chat with their friends after they play the game. So this is the behavior that we actually are driving that basically has pretty interesting impact on the player behavior. So it's almost like a metagame, right? So let's not optimize the game only towards what people do while they play, but let's add user experiences to enhance the user experience of what players do before they play the game. right? So let's enable them to chat with each other, to jump into the game so much easier. Let's enable them to share the coolest moments of their gameplay after they play the game, so they discuss this and come back to the game. And this is interesting user behavior, but I also wanted to talk about some data that we're seeing on our network that showcases that games show social networking behavior. How many of you are familiar with retention charts? Like how retention charts work, right? It's really good when your chart goes flat. And you might remember that Facebook in the early days, one of the things that they recognized is that if you had 5 friends in 5 days or something, you get locked in to Facebook, right? That's social networking behavior. One thing that we see on Bunch is that if you have only one friend, the data is kind of flat. But it basically flattens around at 15% or something. But a really interesting thing is, each time you add a friend on the Bunch network, the retention grows by 1.3 times. So this is exactly behavior like a social network. So that basically is a data point that supports the thesis that social games behave like social networks. And I think we need to start looking at social game growth like we're looking at growing chat applications and social networks, right? Instead of just relying on paid user acquisition. Another thing that we're seeing is people who are able to chat with their friends and come back to the game more often do come back to the game more often. On the left, you see the day 1, day 7, and day 30 retention points for people who play Roblox on Bunch. And on the right, you see the retention data for day 1, day 7, and day 30 for people who play Roblox in general. And the data on the right has been taken from App Annie and Android devices. So really interesting thing is, it starts similar, right? So day 1 retention is almost the same. But as you're going towards 7 and 30, the retention of the users who can play the game often with their friends and the ability to talk to each other while they play the game is almost double the retention of the general users. And obviously, people spend more time with their friends. If it's basically possible to play the game with their friends, they spend more time, because it's essentially a social activity like a board game. So these are some of the data points that I wanted to share, and some ways that you can make your games more like social networks. Happy to take questions if you guys had any.
Oh, thank you. Yep, there we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, anyone got any questions? I have plenty. If you don't, I mean, the reason I have plenty is because I'm a big believer in this whole idea of thinking outside of the pixels. We've had this conversation over coffee many a times as well. Yeah. So I'm probably going to be self-indulgent if I do. There's a question at the back there, so you've saved me from telling Selcuk everything I think about anyway.
Do you find that virality experiments perform better than onboarding experiments?
What experiments?
So feature sets or A/B tests involving inviting users, collaboration or social features improve the retention rates versus just helping users learn the game?
I think it's like apples and oranges, right? I think you need to do both, right? So what we basically find, though, is that there is this fine balance of adding too much to the game, right? Because one obvious point of contention is that, sure, if the gaming behavior is more like a social network, the retention obviously increases, right? But then if you really build a lot of gaming, social networking features into your game, then you can Frankenstein your game and make it more difficult for people to kind of onboard and monetize and all that stuff. That's why our thesis is about, instead of building these things into the game, optimize your game to work flawless with external applications and make it kind of easy to kind of play together. So that's what we're really saying.
Yeah, I had a client who had 137 steps in their tutorial. and obviously their retention was terrible, and most of it was about removing the rails.
Yeah.
And essentially, where people were, noticing when people had problems. And I think, I haven't had this particular experience, but when we've run things like PlayStation Home, and we had communities of people playing together on the same environment in this sort of social context, we absolutely saw, if you could turn around and your avatar could look at the other guy and tell them what they're doing wrong, way better. Seriously, way
That's
better.
how we play board games, right? Like
Exactly.
when you play Monopoly for the first time with your friends showed you how to play the game.
Yeah, a lot of the virtual world stuff, I think, kind of shows this stuff really, really sings. But that's obviously my own thought. Anyone got any questions? Anything else? I'm going to ask something. So one of the things that I think strikes me is this: what happens afterwards?
Yeah.
And one of the things I think is really interesting from some work we did when I was a Unity evangelist back in the day was the importance of like this idea of seeing the other person as I'm playing, but then also being able to watch the playback and talk about it. How important is that to that cycle?
It's super important, and I would say that download the new version of our application coming out in a couple of weeks. So we really believe in this like before and after cycle, and we were actually at our company retreat, and one of our developers explained this thing that it very much aligns with the metagame theory, which I didn't really know. We thought it was like, yeah, these are some ideas that we had, and like one of our developers who has a ton of experience in gaming was like, this is actually like a theory that people have called metagame. So there's like a game, which is like a whole bunch of systems, and there's like metagames, essentially like what are the behaviors before and after that encapsulate the game that drives the gaming behavior, right? So this could be like a super game on top of the game, but also this could be people selling their characters on Warcraft, or people engaging with their communities on Discord, and what do they do before and after. And I think one of the really interesting ways of driving that loop is, one, provide tools for people to find new friends and chat with each other, but also create context for conversation after the game. And right now it's more like unstructured, right? Conversations happen on Discord and Reddit and stuff like that. And I think we see an opportunity to create like a more conformist experience, where there's one tool where you can do stuff with your friends before the game. We're actually adding features that let you basically do a lot of things that similar to what Unity did at the time. So for example, if you're having a really good time and a party with your friends, wouldn't it be cool the next day saying like, hey, here's like the 5 coolest things that happened in your game. You can re-experience them and choose to share them on Snapchat. It's kind of like going to a bar, hanging out with your friends, and when you're sober, you share the photos. So the new bar is like the new games, right? So that's some of what we're thinking.
Sounds good to me. So this is another question. I'm going to say thank you very much again. So thank you.